Namaste and welcome. I'm Pratim Ranjan Bose and you are watching my podcast Perspective. In this episode, I'll discuss about Bangladesh. The Sheikh Hasina government in Bangladesh is history. The meltdown has been a bit too dramatic for even the most seasoned analysts to expect. The development has created definite concerns of prolonged unrest in Bangladesh and the sub-region. To look back, on August 1, I interviewed a top Bangladeshi editor who has been a strong critic of the Hasina government. He blamed Hasina for the crisis, but ruled out the possibility of the fall of the government, and for a reason. It was unexpected that the army will conduct a peaceful coup on August 5 and ease out Hasina out of the country. Bangladesh Army is a white elephant that makes money on government contracts and foreign postings, mostly in the UN peacekeeping forces. In today's global environment, they cannot dare to unseat an elected, quote-unquote, government, however managed those elections may be, without the backing of the West. After the coup, the US was quick to appreciate Bangladesh army for its quote-unquote restraint. Many things happened in the last few weeks. Some were visible, like the early active support of a prominent foreign-funded NGO in Bangladesh to the protests. NGOs are a significant contributor to Bangladeshi economy and wield political power. Hasina's arrogance came in her way to resolving a very manageable student protest in the first half of July. Her ministers never tried to gain the confidence of the protesters through dialogue. They threw weight and tried to dominate the discourse. Instead of applying restraint, she applied force. It is unbelievable how long stay in power can convert an once astute politician into a thick-head, far detached from the ground realities. However, the transformation of the movement beginning third week of July was indicative of the presence of an organized and tough opponent than a loose army of students. The rest followed a pattern. People were out on the streets, body bags kept rising, army rolled in. Initially, they ensured law and order, but just when the peace was returning, anarchy resumed. There were targeted attacks on police, and Army League activists also began attacks on religious minorities. Due to its experience of army rule, Bangladeshis are extremely fearful of army. This time, they saw a cheerful army sharing pleasantries with people. The rest is known. Even the gates of the Prime Minister's residence were opened to be looted, probably to complete the imagery of public anger. People rejoiced the fall of the tyrant, quote unquote. Meanwhile, the entire country was gripped by anarchy. The same Dhaka University, which was an epicenter of secular movements in the past, saw destruction of statues of secular figures like the Sufi singer Lalan Fakir and Bangladesh's national poet Nazrul Islam. A sculpture garden created by Bangladesh's most prolific sculptor was destroyed. You can see destruction on the screen. If you remember that sculptures are considered un-Islamic and Sufi Muslims had always been targets of fundamentalists, then you know which forces are at play. It is one thing to express your anger against Hasina. It is simply another thing to torch Bangabandhu Memorial Museum. The nation's liberation hero, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, was killed in this house on August 15, 1975, along with most of his family members, except daughters, Sheikh Hasina and Sheikh Rehana. There are reports of rampant killings, rape, arson from across the country following the exit of Hasina. Criminals are roaming free. Even traffic police is absent on the streets of Dhaka. It is the job of the Bangladeshi government to ensure law and order. As an Indian analyst, I am more concerned about the future of Bangladesh, which is linked to India's future. My fear is it might remain restless for some time to come. More precisely, what we are witnessing is probably the beginning of an anarchy trap. I am not the only one. Many intellectuals in Dhaka are also fearing the same. You may hear the response of Dr. Ahmed Abid, a researcher in peace and conflict issues and adjunct to the Western Sydney University, Australia. I asked Dr. Abid two questions. First, Hasina government failed Bangladesh, but does the future look promising? Listen to him.
There is no question of moving to a prospective future, even if a group of foresighted and experienced patriots heads the interim government. The internal and external actors are active in getting their positions and places, and there is a pretty chance of raising conflicts of interest and internal conflict which must end up in anarchy for an uncertain time.
Second, is there a fear that Bangladesh may enter an anarchy trap?
There are examples of destroying archives and cultural motifs, mostly sculptures, by crazy mobs signifies the opposite scenario. The demonic other forces are in action.
There are many reasons behind such pessimism. Abid spoke about the emerging political scenario in Bangladesh. I would like to point out the economic side of the problem, which I believe was a primary reason behind rising grievances against Hasina over the last 5 years. Bangladesh was into an economic crisis for nearly 2 years. This was partly triggered by global factors, post-COVID uncertainties, and partly due to Hasina's failure to reform the economy when the going was good. That Hasina government became hostage to a state of corrupt businessmen added to Bangladesh's economic misery. One businessman, an advisor to Prime Minister, who is also the biggest bank defaulter, became the all-important person after PM. He was visible everywhere, even on prime ministerial meetings. Declining economic fortunes, rising hardships, and glaring corruption by the influential had aggrieved people. This point was underscored by Professor Selim Raihan of Dhaka University in a conversation after the collapse of the Hasina government. Listen to this short clip.
That despite that, Sheikh Hasina and her regime had many success. We must admit that. Until 2018, 2019, if you look at many of the economic indicators, Bangladesh was doing very good. But then there was a problem, like, I would say in last 2 or 3 years, her government, and especially she, was surrounded by many corrupt people and a large number of cronies who were, I think, in many ways, undermining or, destroying the kind of success Bangladesh had in the past.
There are two takeaways from this discussion. First, the democracy debate is limited to a very small section of people in the middle and upper middle class. If Hasina won managed elections, so did Lee Kuan Yew, the architect of modern Singapore. And China has no democracy. Generally, people are happy as long as their life and livelihood are ensured or as long as they feel growth. Bringing the economy back on the growth path is therefore the single most important tool to ensure peace and stability in Bangladesh. My fear is, and it is a considered fear, restructuring the economy will not be possible in the emerging political scenario in Bangladesh, and that will add to the restlessness. Would love to talk more about it in the future. Thank you for watching Perspective. If you like this episode, please share and subscribe. See you next week. फिर मिलेंगे.